On this edition of the Correspondents, unrest continues in Venezuela with more protests against the government's plan to rewrite the Constitution, even as the country's economy grinds to a halt. New U.S. sanctions punishing Russia for interference in last year's election clears a major hurdle in Congress, but sets up new roadblocks on what the president can or cannot do. And has the dawn of the electric automobile finally arrived? Well, at least one Swedish automaker believes the answer is yes. And welcome to the Correspondents on Voice of America. I'm Milar Stega in Washington. Well, the once rich country of Venezuela continued to spiral into chaos this week as opposition forces took part Thursday in a nationwide strike aimed at forcing President Nicolas Maduro to cancel an upcoming vote aimed at rewriting the Constitution. Protesters threw up roadblocks in neighborhoods, leading to violent clashes with Venezuelan security forces. President Maduro says he called for Sunday's vote to select a new constitutional assembly and to, quote, restore order in Venezuela. He also blamed the country's woes on the United States, which announced new sanctions against members of Maduro's inner circle. More than 100 people have been killed in 4 months of protests. Thousands have been injured in clashes with security forces. Now, with food and supplies scarce in many parts of the country, many Venezuelans have been crossing the border into neighboring Colombia to buy much-needed supplies. A growing number of Venezuelans blame Maduro's government for the lack of food, medicines, as well as other necessities. And for the latest now on what's going on in Venezuela ahead of Sunday's crucial vote, we are joined on Skype from the border town of Cúcuta, Colombia, on the western edge of Venezuela by Celia Mendoza with VOA Spanish service, and also live on Skype from the capital, Caracas, Venezuela, by Alvaro Algarra, our VOA reporter in South America. Hola, and thank you both. Good to have you both back this week. Gracias. Alvaro, looks like it's raining where you are in Caracas. Tell me what the mood is like in Caracas. Has it changed since we last spoke last week?
Yes, sir. Good morning to all the audience of Voice of America, the Correspondents. Effectively, today it's raining. It's been raining. It's been 2 hours since the civic strike for 48 hours just finished. But the opposition called to go to the streets after 12 at noon to go to protest against this change of the Constitution, against this election supposed to be on July 30, this Sunday. People is very nervous about what could happen in Venezuela. It's been 7 days in last 48 hours in Venezuela during the protest. People doesn't have food. People need to get medicine. It's very hard for the people who is living in Venezuela. The embassy of the United States called to their people to go out of the country. It's very difficult what's going on in Venezuela.
Yeah, and Celia, as you heard Alvaro, it's like kind of a dangerous situation there right now. But you are in Cúcuta in Colombia, one of the border towns, I'm told, near Venezuela. Can you tell our audience why you are there in Cúcuta?
I'm exactly here because over the past few days we have seen a large increase in the amount of Venezuelans and Colombians who live in Venezuela who are coming back to Cúcuta, who are using Cúcuta to provide or supply themselves with food, medicines, and also some of them are actually using it to leave the country. Some of them are in the route to Ecuador, Peru, Brazil. Some of them are staying here in Cúcuta and other cities. But one of the major reasons they're coming here is because they are here. We are right now in the hospital of Cúcuta, where the people of Venezuela is able to come through the emergency room system to be able to get free health care services.
Wow.
That's a big help, especially for those people that for a longest time haven't been able to be seen by a doctor or to have the elements for the doctors to attend them. We just spoke to a mother who is pregnant and who actually years ago in Venezuela because of the care that they were not able to provide there. And now she's here in Colombia as a Venezuelan, getting over it and being able to be attended and to be cared for. And it's not actually her country.
Yeah, it looks like the population of Cucuta just doubled there. It's a lot of people, Celia. I'm wondering, though, are folks in Colombia sympathetic to what's going on in Venezuela?
They're very sympathetic, and that's something that we have seen. Being a Colombian myself, I experienced the fact that Venezuela opened the doors to Colombians back in the day when Colombia experienced their difficulties with violence and narco traffic. Nowadays, Colombians are opening the doors to the Venezuelans, and having able to give back a little bit is something that they take with pride. The president of Colombia made that call on the 30th of May where they opened the hospitals, but they also are allowing them to get other services in Colombia. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody is happy with the arrival of Venezuelans. A lot of people are concerned about employment, about security, about the cost that it actually charged to the health system, and that's something that the Colombian people is trying to figure out. Some of the mayors in the town, as well as some of the administrators in the healthcare system, are talking about refugee camps. They're talking about getting the United Nations involved and try to set up camps like it is in Jordan or Turkey, where Syrian refugees are being taken care of. And that is especially a talk that it has ramped up over the past few days. Now that Venezuela is preparing to go to the Constitution vote on Sunday.
Okay, and let me turn to Alvaro now. Speaking of the Constitution, as Celia mentioned, I'm wondering if you've looked at the polls, Alvaro, what is the level of support there in Caracas for Maduro's plan for this July 30th vote? Does he have supporters, or is the vast majority of Caracas mostly against this plan to hold a vote on July 30th?
The support of Maduro is about 25% of the people in Venezuela. It's the lowest popularity for a president in the history. The majority of the people doesn't want to change the constitution. It's important to say that Nicolás Maduro last night called to the opposition to a dialogue, but there is no time for a dialogue. People doesn't want to change the constitution. People last week said 7.5 million of people said no, we don't want to change the constitution. So in the next 48 hours, anything could happen in Venezuela.
Right. The next 48 hours, Alvaro, could be very significant where you are. Are you worried about safety, for example, of the people there? There seems to be a lot of people in spite of the rain.
Of course, when you go out of the streets in Venezuela, you don't know if you come back. I have to stress this to protect myself, because journalists are very dangerous in Venezuela in this time, every time, all the journalists, because the censorship. That's a very important point in Venezuela. The government doesn't want to let the people know what is going on in the country. It's very, very critical moment.
It's a difficult situation there, but Celia, I imagine things are equally difficult where you are in Cucuta. I imagine there are probably food shortages. Just looking at the numbers of people that have been flocking in across the border, are there any shortages going on in Cucuta?
As right now, we haven't seen any shortages in Cucuta, but we have seen a large presence of police, migration officers. The migration of Colombia has sent over a larger amount of agents that will be able to assist in the border. One of the things that we have seen is people sleeping in the streets, going outside the parks, and staying in the open areas of the town. Luckily for them, Cucuta is a fairly warm town, and that has helped for people to be able to stay outside. But one of the things that we really have seen is the presence of the families that have been able to cross and to be able to leave the town. Now, something that you mentioned is security. The security across the bridge, it is very tense. El Táchira, which is the state that is neighboring Cucuta, is one of those states because the amount of protests and violence that has ramped up in the past few years. And that is something that worries the Border Patrol in Colombia, especially in the next few hours. One of the things that you mentioned especially is what it could happen, and Colombian authorities are very concerned about those next few hours in terms of people trying to come in with the border that is closed, because they believe in, the mayor of Cucuta told us that on Saturday the border will be closed as usually closes during the election. They have not received word from the government of Venezuela, but they assume it will happen because he has done it in the past, and that is something that is of great concern for the people of Colombia, that they are following closely what happened in the next few hours, and if people is not able to come back to Colombia because they don't know if he decides to reopen the border. And that is a reality that they are trying to manage as right now.
Alvaro, I'm out of time now, and I wanted to just ask you a personal question. Do you feel safe as a journalist where you are? Do you feel safe?
No, sir, I don't feel safe in Venezuela.
Okay. Well,
no, not one feels safe in Venezuela.
Please, both of you, be very...
30,000 died.
Please, be careful, Alvaro and Celia. I'm out of time, so gracias. Thank you very much.
Sir.
And we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, the U.S. Congress takes steps to get tough on Russia, even if it means sidestepping the president. That's up next. This is the Correspondents on Voice of America.
News and notes. This is Living Better.
Researchers like Dr. Tina Hahn and Charles Nelson say that stress during early childhood can harm children's brains and lead to major illnesses later in life.
Dealing with and preventing toxic stress is the most important thing that we can do in medicine.
Kids exposed to domestic violence, kids exposed to bullying at school, kids exposed to neighborhood violence.
Recent studies suggest that stress during early childhood can alter brain structure, affecting emotions and behavior, and cause physical ailments.
So we know that high levels of toxic stress that occur early in life and then continue can lead to an increased risk of diabetes and heart disease as well.
Experts say the first 3 years of life are critical to brain development, and that safe spaces, quiet times, and breathing exercises for preschoolers can help children cope with stress so they can learn. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
And welcome back to the Correspondents on Voice of America. I'm Millar Sega in Washington. Well, new sanctions punishing Russia for its interference in last year's U.S. presidential election cleared a key step this week as a U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill Tuesday expanding congressional checks on President Trump's ability to ease penalties. VOA's Katherine Gibson files this report from Capitol Hill.
While the bill would impose tough economic and diplomatic penalties, it also sends a message to President Trump. New congressional oversight powers a needed check, said the top Democrat on House Foreign Affairs.
If President Trump wants to play golf or do something with his crony, Mr. Putin, he can count the Congress out because we're going to punish Mr. Putin.
Amid congressional investigations into alleged links between the Trump campaign and Russia, an unusually bipartisan move by lawmakers to limit executive powers to lift sanctions.
This is a significant restraint on President Trump because no president wants to lose the leverage of being able to take off sanctions.
A restraint the White House initially lobbied against before coming out in support of the sanctions earlier this week.
The administration is supportive of being tough on Russia, particularly in putting these sanctions in place.
The cost of congressional oversight? The possible loss of U.S. diplomatic flexibility, says a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine.
Sanctions, once they're embedded in law, may actually prove less successful in eliciting a change in Russian behavior than when they're based on executive order.
So, how does this sanctions bill affect the president's executive authority? For the latest on what's been a busy, perhaps disappointing week for the White House, we're joined here in Washington by VOA senior national correspondent Jim Malone, along with VOA congressional correspondent Katherine Gibson. I thank you for that report. So, Katherine, how does this congressional bill actually affect what the president can or cannot do when it comes to sanctions against some of these adversarial countries that we're talking about?
Well, as we heard there, this is quite an unusual step on the part of the U.S. Congress to limit the president's executive authority in this way. It basically gives Congress the power to review and demand that he not lift or soften those sanctions, and that's something that hasn't happened before. And it's quite clear that even House Republicans were worried about that and made this step because of it.
So essentially, Congress tied the president's hands. Now, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to get the impression that through this bipartisan action, of overwhelming bipartisan action, that there doesn't seem to be a lot of faith or support in the president's ability to do the right thing, at least when it comes to countries like Russia.
Well, I think through the vote totals alone in both the House and the Senate,
overwhelming.
it was just beyond doubt that even if the president decided here to veto this, it seems like it will be easily overridden. And, he continues to face this overhang of Russia on various fronts. The investigation.
It never goes away, right? It's always there.
And he's always talked about wanting to do better outreach. And this is a very stern rebuke. And we already see now the Russians responding, limiting U.S. diplomats in Russia, taking a rather strong response. So certainly, if you look at the tea leaves for the president, it would be a cautionary tale at this point.
No, and Catherine, I'm wondering, I'm kind of confused by the White House response to this.
You're not the only one.
Because on the one hand, they seem to be suggesting that, yeah, we're in favor of tougher sanctions, but on the other hand, there seems to be some suggestion that the president might veto this. Does he have the ability to do that?
Well, the White House has left that option open, but it's going to be incredibly politically risky because remember that these Russia sanctions were also packaged with sanctions against Iran and North Korea that the Trump administration supports. So rejecting those Russia sanctions means rejecting those as well. He also is facing a veto-proof majority in Congress. Like Jim said, these passed overwhelmingly in the U.S. Congress, and he faces a tough road. He's just going to take that political risk.
Week for the president. I mean, early Friday morning, a very devastating vote in the Senate for the president's
defeat on
repeal.
The most limited sort of rollback of Obamacare that the Republicans could even imagine, disappointing conservatives, but they couldn't even squeak that through. The
vice president showed he must have been very disappointed too.
He was on
there for
the Senate floor trying to convince John McCain, Senator McCain, to try to side with the administration. And in the end, John McCain gave it literally a thumbs down. And sank the bill. This is a huge setback for the administration. We don't know that this is the end of the road on health care, probably not, but it clearly demonstrates that they just cannot resolve the kind of split within the Republican Party between moderates who fear the impact of what the Republican replacement would do and conservatives who are trying to make good on their 7 years demand to roll back Obamacare.
And McCain, Catherine, was so crucial to whatever effort McConnell was trying to do here. Has McCain gotten to the point where he doesn't care anymore that his integrity is now on the line as a result of his illness?
Well, we saw that earlier in the week when he had that dramatic speech on the floor of the U.S. Senate talking about how this was really a time when we really needed to take a step back and look at the divided political debate in this country and look for a way to move forward in a bipartisan manner because, frankly, just the past 7 months working on health care has been chaotic, to say the least.
Right. Jim Malone, can the White House move forward? I mean, we're looking at multiple controversies and issues. You've got AG Jeff Sessions. We don't know whether or not he's going to keep his job. Rex Tillerson, there's some question as to whether he wants to keep his job. And then the communications chief, the new communications chief, 1 week into his
quite a week.
venture. Yeah, now he's in trouble.
This is Mr. Scaramucci,
some very colorful language coming out of Mr.
Yeah, that's one way to
Scaramucci.
look at that. Colorful language, absolutely. Language which I can really not reference on a program like this one.
We can't even put subtitles.
But there's obviously an internal war going on within the White House staff. The question in all this is, what does the president think of all this? Is he, did he hatch this plan to kind of see who's survival of the fittest or something? I mean, he is a former reality TV show.
It's like an episode of Survivor, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
and while all of this drama is going on up on up in the White House, you have Congress waiting for leadership from the administration. You know, if there had been more of a push from the administration on health care, then maybe there would have been some direction and a way forward. Instead, we've spent 7 months and really haven't accomplished much of anything.
No. With the agenda struggling as it is, and he
really
wants
is.
to deliver on those campaign promises, to have this internal war within the White House and staffers calling each other out is a huge distraction that they really can't afford right now.
It seems like the White House is very dysfunctional, it seems, at this stage. And then to top it all off, we also have the transgender issue that is sort of roiling the military right now. I mean, tell us a little bit more about that. Is policy now going to be dictated by Twitter?
Well, you know, I was up on Capitol Hill when all of that came through, and House Democrats were just stunned that, you know, this was done without consultation, apparently, with the Pentagon, and came through on a tweet, in a two-part tweet where we were all waiting for 10, 15 minutes to see what that next step was. And it was this, you know, people were just stunned once again that this is how policy is being conducted.
And Jim Malone, I've got like 10 seconds left here. All of these things happening in 1 week, is this part of Trump's plan? Is this a distraction to keep us sort of like guessing?
We don't know, but we do know that Republicans, there is a little bit more pushback now, especially coming from Senate Republicans. They're finally seeing some signs here that they need to step up and be a little more critical and resistant, particularly if there's any move to go after Jeff Sessions and then the special counsel on the Russian program. There's
never a dull moment, I have to tell you, here in Washington. But thank you so much, Jim. And Catherine, happy birthday. We're taking another break now, but when we come back, the evolution of the electric car. Are the days of the internal combustion engine numbered? Swedish automaker Volvo seems to think so. But first, a reminder, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, and comments on our Facebook page. The address is VOA The Correspondents. We'll be right back. Thanks, Joe.
Health news and notes. This is Living Better.
This is the future of difficult surgeries as done with robots, as featured at a technology showcase in the UK. In development, a robot that can be used on eye veins as thin as a human hair.
The robot will make sure that the hand vibrations of the surgeon are completely eliminated. And the surgeon can still decide on any moment where the instrument goes inside the eye.
That's Andy Gibbles with the University of Leuven. Another robot in development can perform on breast tissue and deliver precise tumor-killing heat or cold. University of Twente professor Stefano Strangioli.
We made a technology which is all of plastic and pressure air, which allows to move a needle very precisely in real time under MR guidance.
Surgery robots have made headlines since the turn of the millennium, and experts say they continue to evolve to offer greater precision and less trauma to the patient. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
And welcome back to the Correspondents on Voice of America. I'm Mil Arcega in Washington. Well, smog, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. There's a big effort worldwide to curb the increasingly serious air pollution in our cities. Now, this week, authorities in France, followed by those in Britain, announced the goal of banning the sale of new gas and diesel-powered cars by 2040. Now, such a ban could ultimately speed up development and sales of electric and hybrid electric vehicles worldwide. Engineers are, in fact, working hard to make such environmentally friendly cars more attractive to consumers. Our VOA's science and technology correspondent George Putich has our report.
Electric propulsion is slowly but surely taking over from the fossil fuel engines.
All cars released to the market after 2019 will be electrified. Then we talk about 3 levels. First step is to recover the brake energy in a hybrid system. Second is a twin engine system we already have on the market, and then the all electric propulsion, third level.
The interim hybrid electric cars already have energy management systems that switch from electric to gas propulsion depending on the speed and required power. But researchers at the University of California, Riverside say there's still room for improvement.
What we're doing and proposing is not only look at the sensor data on the vehicle, but look at data also outside. So traffic data, traffic signal data, and also looking at patterns in how people drive.
And joining us now to talk about the future, we welcome VOA science and technology reporter George Putic. Thank you for that report, George. Fascinating stuff. I mean, I almost get the sense that we're on the cusp of something big happening with electric cars. Do you get that feeling too?
No, I don't, because we are still waiting for several breakthroughs. The most important one would be with batteries. Batteries are...
That's still a major challenge, huh?
Yes, batteries are very good, but they can be better, and they have to be better in order to increase the mileage of the electric cars, so that people would say, okay, if I buy an electric car, I will be able to visit my, my family, my relatives, several hundred kilometers away.
It's because of the range issue, right? Electric cars don't have a further range than, say, what is it, 300 miles?
Yeah, about 300 miles. One issue is the range. The other issue is the price. The electric cars are still a little bit more expensive than gas-powered cars. And it makes sense that, for instance, Tesla is making started with very expensive cars in $100,000 range, which is unaffordable for most.
The new model is selling for $35,000,
yes,
right?
Correct.
So I mean that makes it brings
they're increasing the technology, and they're getting better. And they're finding ways to save in order to attract customers with regular income.
Where we seem to be seeing a lot of progress, though, is in countries like China, now currently buying more electric vehicles than just about any other country right now. Why is that? Is it because they're providing incentives, or is it because pollution is so bad in Beijing that they have to do something?
It's both, and there's another thing. The regulations in the United States are much more stringent than in China. The safety concerns are so high that people do not want to, manufacturers do not want to risk putting a car on the market that will, I don't know, maybe catch fire, like the batteries on, remember the Boeing Dreamliner?
Yes.
That was a big problem and big concern. So they're going slower in this country and some other countries than in China.
But the fact that companies such as Volvo and that countries like France and Britain are sort of imposing kind of deadlines. Volvo is saying by 2019 we will start producing nothing but hybrid cars. That has to speed up development and technology, don't you think?
Yes, that's correct. And the authorities in France and Britain, and also in Germany and Netherlands, are sending clear message to their public. Start thinking about it. Be prepared that in a certain amount of time we will have to switch to electric propulsion, because we have such a huge problem with pollution in our cities.
And we're looking at, I guess, major infrastructure changes. A lot of the software folks that you talked to already are thinking about that,
yes,
sort of a holistic approach.
Yes, a lot of laboratories all around the world are experimenting. All major manufacturers are experimenting. They do not want to be left behind.
I got a wrap now, but why don't you have an electric car yet?
I will have one soon as it comes to my price range.
I'll probably join you then. And thank you very much, George Putic, and of course all our correspondents. That is our show this week. Make sure that you stay up to date with what's going on around the world. It's as close as your smartphone or tablet. Just bookmark us at voanews.com. We're also on Facebook and YouTube at VOA The Correspondents. I'm Emil Arcega. Thank you for watching. And for now, so long from Washington.